As a mom, it hurts to see your child suffering. But for me, I find comfort in spending time with the Lord. And I want that for her too. But I've learned that I can't force that on her. I can't push her to find comfort and peace in the Lord. One of my favorite stages of parenting is definitely the toddler years. I know it can be exhausting, physically exhausting. You're having to keep this little life safe and cared for and alive, but it's filled with so much playfulness and joy and imagination. Kids are naturally born with off the charts creativity and imagination. Research has showed that kindergartners have genius level creativity. And then as they get older, it kind of diminishes. And it's not because it goes away, it's because we don't encourage it. But in little ones, it just bubbles out naturally, which can be exhausting. I totally get that. But when I look back at my kids, so I have 4 children, my favorite memories are from that season of toddlerhood. They're filled with fun and joy and silliness. One of our favorite things to do was to play dress up. My girls especially, they would love to put on little princess dresses, and they would even want mom to dress up, and I would have a tiara and we would play. They would just be so creative and playful and fun, and my job was to just lean into it, to join in on the fun. Because a lot of times it can be really easy to get distracted by all the things that we have to do, right? Keeping the household running, getting the day-to-day things done. And it's easy to miss out on those moments of fun and playfulness. But especially when they're toddlers, don't miss it. Get down on the floor, play with them. Just join them in their imagination and fun, and you will be amazed with the memories that you will have. And when they're going off to college, you'll look back with such joy that you were present and you were there for all of those fun times of imagination and playfulness. That will continue through the years if you would just encourage that in your kids. So don't miss it. Join in. I know as a mom, it's really easy to get burnt out, to lose our joy, to get into the rut of the day-to-day grind and feel like we lose ourselves. What I've found helpful is spending time with the Lord daily, number one. That's the most important thing that's helped me to keep my joy. Because when I spend time with the Lord, He reorients my perspective and helps me to remember why I'm parenting in the first place. Remembering my purpose helps me to find joy in the mundane things that I do day to day. The dishes, the laundry, the homeschooling that we do can feel kind of meaningless. But when I remember that I am raising a generation of arrows that are going to make an impact in the kingdom, then the dishes remind me of the meals that I get to serve, that I feed and nourish my kids. And the laundry reminds me that we live life and we went to the park and we got dirty, and I find that joy. But it starts with the Lord. And also times, I have a tendency to sometimes get into a depressive state, honestly. And I'm grateful that I have a counselor that I meet with, and she has been a wonderful source of wisdom and just reminding me of perspectives that I can lose sight of really easily. And sometimes I just need to get out of my routine. I need to get into nature alone. For me, putting on worship music and taking a walk in the woods just does something for my soul that nothing else really can do. We live in Florida, and so being at the beach is also a way that the Lord just really rejuvenates my heart and soul. And so find for yourself what it is that fills you up. And make time to do that, because it's so important that we take care of ourselves as moms. We spend time in God's Word. We do things that fill us so that we can pour out to our families with joy overflowing. As parents, we want our kids to know that they can come to us with all of their questions, right? When they're little, their questions are silly, like why is the sky blue? But as they get a little bit older, the questions get more complicated. And so our job as parents is to make sure that our kids know that nothing is off limits. It may be uncomfortable. Like one time, we had just finished studying human reproduction in our homeschool, and we were at the playground, and one of my daughters, completely out of the blue, says, "Mommy, how can 2 mommies have a baby?" I was shocked by this question because I didn't know where it came from. We had studied, how babies were made, and in her mind, I guess she must have seen somewhere something that didn't make sense to her. And at that moment, I had a decision to make. I was uncomfortable. I didn't really want to answer that question, but I knew that it was important for her to know that no question is off limits. So I knelt down and I said, "That's a really great question. I'm so glad that you asked me that. And I want to know what made you think of that. But we're at a playground and there are lots of other kids here that maybe haven't had this conversation with their mommies and daddies yet. So let's save this question and we'll circle back to it when we get home where we can talk about it in private." Now, probably in the back of my mind, I was hoping that she would forget and I didn't want to come back to the question. But I also knew that it was important that I teach her that when she comes to me with a question, we will talk about it. And I might not always have all of the answers, but I do know where to go for the source of answers. And so when we got home, I said, "Ella, come on into my bedroom and we're going to have a conversation." And so we did. We talked about the brokenness of the world, God's design for family, but how some families don't always look the way that God intended families to look. And so we should have compassion on those families, that she was correct, that physiologically two mommies can't have a baby. And so we talked about medical interventions and having babies and adoption and all the different ways that families were created. And we walked away from that discussion, her feeling closer to me, knowing that I was a safe place to come with her questions. And I felt confident knowing that she didn't go to a friend or the internet trying to find the answers to her questions, because I knew that the answers she got from me were answers that lined up with God's truth. And so as parents, let's make sure that our kids know, no matter how awkward questions may be, we are a safe place for them to come. Don't be afraid or intimidated by questions that we don't know. There are always resources out there, and ultimately, pray about it. I know that sometimes it can be hard when we have teens or even preteens that may be facing hard questions in their faith. Maybe they grew up in your home as a Christian home, going to church their whole life, and then something happens that shakes them. In our family, we lost our 16-year-old son just a few months ago, and it rocked our home and it rocked our family, as you can imagine. But especially my middle daughter, she's a teenager, and she's been really angry at God. And as a mom, it hurts to see your child suffering. But for me, I find comfort in spending time with the Lord. And I want that for her too. But I've learned that I can't force that on her. I can't push her to find comfort and peace in the Lord. I've prayed for her nonstop, for all of my girls, as we've walked this journey of grief and questioning why God lets bad things happen to seemingly good people. But I found that the most helpful thing has been to just be present, not to push my thoughts and my answers on her, although she knows that I'm there when she does have questions. We have built a culture in our home where questions are never off limits, no matter how awkward or uncomfortable they may be. And to know that I'm available, that my husband and I are there for our kids. You know, we went through a season where she didn't want to come to church with us. And I struggled with, what's the right thing to do here, Lord? Do I force her? I mean, she's in my household and I have the right as her mom to make her obey and come with us. But I also knew that her heart was really tender, and I didn't want her to get angrier at God because I was forcing her. And so we made the decision to let her make the decision of whether or not she wanted to go to church. And it was scary because, you know, you hear about people who go through tragedy and they walk away from their faith. And that's the last thing that I want for any of my children. But we felt like the right thing to do was to give her time. And I will say this most recent Easter, she came to church with us because, you know, it's Easter and we're a family and we go to church together. And it was probably the first time that she came into worship with us all. And it was a beautiful experience. She wept during worship. And then she asked to go forward to the altar during the time of prayer. And I was so moved to see her little heart. She wanted the Lord. And she asked our pastor to pray and help her to know where to take her questions and to be open to God's comforting her. And so I saw my prayers answered right before my eyes. So I guess my advice to any parent is to just be patient, to trust the Lord, and to pray and seek His discernment. Because my situation with my daughter is going to be different from yours. And my answers are not going to necessarily be the same answers for you. But the one thing that I know without any doubt is that God created my daughter and he placed her in my home. And so I can go to him for the answers. And so that's my encouragement to you. Seek the Lord and he will answer you.